We are back with Susie Clark. And Susie, I am pretty pumped to chat with you because you can do it all. All right. You are literally the person who can design the cover, can design the interior and format the book, and you're an expert on self publishing, utilizing the different platforms. So, welcome to the show, Susie. Happy to have you.
Hi, Jake. I'm so happy to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So you have an extensive background in the self-publishing world, okay? But where did you get started? And then how did that turn into your love for self-publishing?
Okay, yeah. So I studied graphic design and I started working at this publishing company. It was a financial direct response publishing company. And then I worked as a graphic designer at first, worked my way up pretty fast to be the art director. And at that point, a few years after that, the publishing company decided to also acquire a book publishing company. So all of a sudden, I was thrown into this, Susie, we will now also publish books, not just newsletters, direct mail, we'll also do books. So it kind of fell onto my plate out of nowhere. It was like, we don't have all the resources in house. Susie, can you go hire copy editors? Can you hire, can your team produce all the covers, the formatting, do all that, take it to Amazon, wherever. And so I had to just figure it out. And I worked there for over a decade in total. And while I was doing that, I also nurtured a freelancing business. And I just loved working with people, and I loved being able to learn as I went and like just keep acquiring new knowledge and experiences. And then in 2019, I took my business full time, and I wasn't really sure if I should go into logo design, branding, or if I should go books. But I learned over the last couple of years that I really, really love self-publishing and helping authors, especially individual authors, because that excitement that they have to, like, I can literally take them through the last steps. I can be there all the way till the end. And that excitement, I just like love so much. And so I got more and more into self-publishing. And as soon as someone is ready with their copy, I just can take them to the end. I can literally bring their book to life. Like they will be able to hold their books in their hands. And like that excitement gets me excited. And I think that's where we are today. Like I just love going with that energy and helping people.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and thank you for sharing. And I know that feeling. You know, as someone who works with authors, it's amazing for us to get them to that point. But what's the best feeling coming from me as an author, not a coach, is that feeling when I get that first proof copy in the mail. Right? It's that feeling when I click the publish button and all the butterflies happen. And you're like, we did it. Like it's game time. And so we're going to spend the majority of time today talking about the different ways to self-publish, the pros and cons of this. But what I want to ask you to start off is around the cover design. What would you say are some of the pieces that make a great cover? And I want to focus this on like nonfiction, because that's the majority of our audience. What kind of makes a good cover? What are some of the things that you really enjoy helping people create that's valuable for their audience?
Yeah, so with a great cover, the first and most important thing is that people can read the title. That is your most important thing. Like, it's not so much like you don't want to have a million things on there and distract from what is actually important, and that is your title. Like, if you see your cover on Amazon, on different websites that you're using to advertise your book, if you can't read the title, it is really hard for people to find any sort of interest in it. So you want to make sure the title is very legible. It's large, but it also creates some interest, that there's hierarchy. You don't want your subtitle and your author's name all be the same font and same size. You want there to be a hierarchy. You want to lead the eye. That's really important in design. It's like you draw them in, you have the title that's exciting, but also legible. And then you lead them through to the subtitle and then the author's name. Or if it's a really famous author, then maybe that becomes the most important thing. Like you will probably see Stephen King really, really big on the cover because the name sells. So like it really depends sometimes, but in general, for most authors, it's the title that's really important. And then everything else just has to kind of work together. And you want to make sure you don't put things too close to the edges, where things could even be cut off in production, One thing I noticed is like there are great cover designers out there, but not every cover designer also knows how to produce the right files at the end of the day. So for book publishing, it takes specific kinds of files. We're not just publishing on the web. It's not just a little, tiny little image. It has to work in print as well. And that's where I can really help authors, is like, we're not just producing a tiny little thumbnail. We're like taking it all the way, ebook, print production, and everything. So yeah, title is the most important part, and then comes everything else.
I love where you just took this. I mean, I think that sometimes people, because it's their book, they think that they need to be on the cover. And one of the things that I always tell people is like, unless you're a massive celebrity, a politician, or a massive name recognition, you shouldn't be on the front cover. The focus needs to be about the reader, which in their minds is the title, then the subtitle, and then your name. It's not about you, even though it's your book. And so I love that you addressed that as like the title needs to be read, and not just it needs to be bold and it needs to be eye-catching, right? But it needs to be visible across a variety of different visualizations, right? Both on social media, but on that thumbnail image on Amazon. There's like a way and a science to do that. So thank you for kicking us off with that advice on the cover design. And now I want to get into the publishing side. Okay. You ready for this, Susie?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. So a lot of people get to the point where they write their book and they're like, okay, I did that. That's more than most people ever get to. Mm-hmm. Then they get the book edited, they get it formatted, they get it designed, and they have everything ready. And then they're like, okay, how do I now turn this into a book that somebody could buy anywhere in the world, right? This is the specific part of publishing that people, and this is what you're an expert on, but this is where people get held up. This is a big source of procrastination that I see authors doing, because this is the final step to putting their book out into the world. So I want to start here. What are some of the options and ways that people who are self-publishing can actually self-publish their book?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are two ginormous platforms to make that happen. So one of them is directly from Amazon. They actually created this platform that's called KDP, Amazon's KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, which originally started with actually ebooks, but then they now also have print books, and they keep adding to what they can offer. So Amazon KDP is a huge platform. It's a very user-friendly platform. I love telling people about it, getting authors to use it, because it's free. It's an easy way to upload. You just have to understand some of the terms and files needed, but it's extremely user friendly. You can make changes at any times, and it takes a little bit of that anxiety that you might have to publish away, because they really make it very user friendly. They have great customer service as well. And then the other big giant in the industry is Ingram Spark, which is a little bit different than KDP, where it's a distributor. So instead of them just being their own Amazon, they distribute to different retailers, which are Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Books A Million, Target, Walmart, all these places. So they throw this ginormous net out and put your book onto all these platforms. Doesn't mean you get into physical stores, but you do get on the websites. You need to sell a certain amount of online copies to actually make it into physical stores. That's a whole different story, but it's possible. And because Ingram Spark throws it out to all these retailers, they also create this library. So now small bookstores can order your book from that library. So Ingram Spark, even though it's not free, it's not as user-friendly by all means. It's a very much more difficult platform to navigate, but it is a great way to get your book out there and to self-publish on your own. There are other platforms as well, but really between KDP and Ingram Spark, these are the main giants in this industry to get your book out there and to see it on Amazon. I mean, that's really the goal for most authors, to have your book on Amazon.
Right. And I mean, this is so good. With Ingram Spark, you mentioned Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target, and several others. It also can put your book onto Amazon as well, correct? I just want to make sure that everyone knows that Ingram Spark can do that. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. So you can go through Amazon KDP alone, or you can go straight just through Ingram Spark and get your book onto Amazon. That's their first, they work very close together actually behind the scenes, and that's the first place they're going to put your book on. And one thing I forgot to mention, that both of these platforms also print your book. They're print on demand platforms, so they will also print your book. Some authors don't know that. I always assume everyone knows this, but it's not the case. So they also do print your book. You can buy one at a time just behind the scenes, or you can buy as many as you want, and you can obviously then guide your readers to your Amazon page as well. But yes, they do go onto Amazon.
Okay, so these are the two big giants. So when someone's getting ready to publish their book, they need to make a decision of going with Amazon KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing, or they want to go for Ingram Spark. Now, you mentioned that KDP was free, Ingram Spark was not. Can you share, if you know off the top of your head, can you share what the price is of Ingram Spark? Because I want people to understand, like, is it super expensive to do this, or is it just a minimal investment, but it might be worth it for some people?
Right. So it's not a super expensive investment. It's $49 for a print book, or if you have your ebook ready at the same time, you pay $49 for your print and ebook for the first upload. The only thing where they do get a little pricey is down the road. If you ever have it changed, it's always $25 every single time. So that's where, it becomes a little bit it could be a little bit costly, but you do get to change your price, I think, once a week for free. So that's something you can play with. But yeah, it's $49 for one upload, where KDP is completely free.
And when you say make a change, okay, are you referencing like a second edition, or if someone notices a typo, or what kind of changes are you referencing here when it comes to a book? Like what type of changes would somebody make anyways after the book is published?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of times, once you see your book in print and you hold it in your hands for the first time, you see it in a different format, and all of a sudden you're like, oh no, I should have written it this way, or typos. We will always find typos probably. It's just one of those things, small things you will always catch down the road. But yes, so in this case, something like that, making a change to the actual files, there's a typo, or on the back cover, I can't read the text, the way the black printed against the white, it's hard to read. Can we adjust the color a little bit? Things like that happen, especially when you see it in print. But then also things like changing your categories or changing your price point. Those are small changes. Like I said, those are usually for free, the price point, but making changes to your categories, or making changes to contributors, or the paper that you want to use. You might print it in white paper, and then you're like, oh, I really want to go cream. Those are changes that I'm talking about, if that helps to understand.
Yeah, this is great. I think it's opening up people's eyes to how the publishing process actually works, and what are some of those things. And it's funny that you mentioned typos, because I'll tell you a story. I wrote my second book, and I was getting ready to publish it. It was supposed to come out in October, but I needed to get copies in advance. Now, I didn't know nearly as much about this as I did. So I had to publish the book. I was getting ready for a gig in China. It was my first international speaking gig. I got the gig in China, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to bring copies of my new book there so that I can do some promotional stuff, get some pictures. My book's in China. I thought that would be incredible. But the problem was the book wasn't supposed to come out till October, and my gig was in the summertime. So I rapidly published the book. I did it on KDP. I just push publish so I could get author copies, so that I would have actual physical copies of my own book well before I actually told people to go buy it. I get to China, taking all these pictures, giving it away. I get back from China, and I finally sit down, and I read through it for the first time. And I'm like, oh shit. There were a few typos that we just missed because we got it done faster, but I knew that I could always make these changes. And so what I did, though, because I had already bought 200 copies of my book, is I made these limited edition launch books. And so I turned this typo into an opportunity to give more books away and let people know. And so what we did on launch day was I numbered them 1 out of 200, 2 out of 200, so that people felt really special. And then in there, we put a handwritten note, or a typed up note, that basically said, hey, since the time of its official launch, we've made a few minor tweaks, but the content is the same, because the content didn't change. It was just making sure that people knew that we weren't missing all these mistakes.
Mhm.
And no one ever thought about it. As a matter of fact, they felt that they even got more special treatment because they had a limited edition launch book. And so I think it's really cool that you just shared is that if you have a typo or if you want to make a change, you can do that as a self-published author. And it just depends, depending on the platform you're using, how easy and accessible that is to make those changes. So I wanted to share that with you and with the listeners, because I think that sometimes we're like, it has to be perfect. And while, yes, we should strive for it to be perfect, you should go through the process, you should work with people like us, right? It might slip, right? Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, apparently had a typo that people found. How does her book have a typo, right? Like every book probably has a typo too. So I want to go back though to publishing, okay? When you're looking at, well, okay, Susie, you make KDP and Ingram Spark, they both sound good, they both sound different. Like, which one do I do? What is your personal preference for helping authors at the beginning and then as they go through their author journey?
Yeah, great questions. And that's a really good story. And I liked how you turned that into a great situation after all. People love that. Like they really do. So I think that's amazing. And I have authors a lot of times too that need books ahead of time before launching. And I have an idea for that as well. But your question just now, like which one to pick and which one I would recommend. So I think KDP is such a great platform, and it really gives authors everything they need to get their books onto Amazon and to have something to market. And so I always say KDP is a great way to get your feet wet. Go to KDP, you know, like I'll help you through it too. And you you're not missing out really too much. You know, you just have to make sure that you do your marketing. But then if you do have a marketing plan in place and you have a specific date that you want to publish your book at, that's the one thing about KDP, you cannot set a pre-sale date. So you have to go with Ingram Spark if you want to set something out like a week or 30 days from now and set that pre-sale date. So when you go to Amazon, you can click that button and order ahead before launch. That's something KDP just can't do. So when I work with people that have a specific marketing plan that know April 8th is my date, then I'll tell them, let's go to Ingram Spark so we have this link and you can collect orders already. Otherwise, we'll have to wait until April 8th or the 7th. Now they actually do. You can schedule it a day ahead, which before you could literally only backdate it. Now you can schedule it on the day or the day ahead, but then it doesn't mean that's out right away because it does take a couple days to process. So with Ingram Spark, you can schedule ahead and then you could get your author copies ahead of time too. So let's say you're 30 days away from your release date, your launch date, you can actually get through the process and then you can order author copies through Ingram Spark and have them. With KDP. You could only do the proof copies, which will have a lovely banner over them, which don't help for photo shoots. And so I had a client recently, if it's okay to share this real quick, she had a photo shoot set and I didn't know about that. And she thought the day of release means she has books in her hands already. So she scheduled the photo shoot a few weeks prior. And I'm like, wow, we don't even have it published anywhere yet. It's not even available for pre-sale. And so there's another way with 48 hours where you can get your book very quickly, and they do a good job at producing books as well. So that's just another route. And like there are other ways to get a book printed, but you know, it takes extra money. They don't just sell one at a time, which is the beauty of KDP and Ingram Spark. You can really just buy one book at a time. I used to work at this publishing company and we would print 10,000s at a time. Like, imagine how I felt when I pressed those buttons, like, yeah, it's good to go. Like, hopefully there's no typo on these, but it still happens. Things like that always happen. But yeah, so that's kind of where I would gauge it based on the usability of the platform and then also the pre-release. I think those are some main key points.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I typically tell people, especially if they're first time authors and they're really trying to get it going, is to go with KDP right off the bat. And for me, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, is the majority of books are sold on Amazon. Okay. And that's just the way the world works today. So in my mind, it's, well, if the majority of the books are sold on Amazon, why wouldn't I just go there to start? Because it's free and it's the easiest thing. Okay, it's very, very easy to do it. You could publish your book if you know what you're doing within an hour, especially if you have all your stuff. Like you can literally publish it within an hour and be live or order a proof copy. But I'm curious if you ever have people that will do KDP first and then Ingram Spark. Or, what are your thoughts on using one and then the other? And can you do that?
Yes, so you can do that. And I recently just had a book where we only went with KDP. We did the free ISBN. We just went with KDP and it was great. But then he also wanted his book in libraries and small bookstores. And he kept hearing like he needs to have it on Ingham Spark, which is true. So he came back and he's like, Susie, how do we make this happen? So first thing to do, if you don't already have your own ISBN number, get an ISBN number because that's like your number to your book and you're attached as the publisher to your book. So then I had to just recreate the files like with the new ISBN number, the new cover files and everything. And then I had to unpublish the current Amazon KDP version so that they don't get confused, and then re-upload everything. And pretty much at the same time to KDP and Ingham Spark. And then you have to make sure that the ISBN number gets accepted by both platforms. It's a little bit of a tricky situation to make sure that it happens, but there's a step process and it just works. And then you can send it through on both. You can also, if you have reviews already on your original posted book, they actually merge over. Like if it doesn't happen automatically, you can just call KDP. They're amazing. Their customer service is so good and they will help you move it. And sometimes what also happens is Ingham Spark and KDP, if you publish on both, sometimes you actually get two listings and all of a sudden your book shows up twice on Amazon. And that's because the metadata, like the description or keywords, might not be exactly the same. For example, with Ingham Spark, you can pick 3 categories and with KDP 2. So if you don't start off with 2 right away, there's already a misalignment and they might just not know, the computer doesn't know in the background, but they will all fix it. It will all work out. I lost my train of thought.
No, you're good. You're good. And so look, here's what's interesting to me, because as you're describing this, I can see myself, if I'm a listener, and I'm like, okay, Jake, you said self-publishing, you can publish it within an hour. Now, I mean, all this thing, and there's a lot that goes into it. And so here's what I would tell you. If you're a first-time author, you're getting ready to publish your first book, pick one or the other platform. Don't try to get fancy. Pick one or the other. And then secondly, okay, now if you're in our coaching program, you're going to have direct access to step-by-step instructions on how to do this. But if you aren't and you're trying to figure it out on your own, consult with somebody like Susie or ask questions. But I would suggest, so that you don't get crazily overwhelmed, is pick one of the platforms, commit to that. Then after you've had a successful launch, then you can determine, okay, am I happy with where it's at? Or do I want to try to expand? Or do I want to make sure that I'm dialed in? Do I want to have the most availability, right? And then you can expand and get into the nitty gritty and all these different things, right? And so I hope that as you're listening to this, you're recognizing that there is unlimited possibilities and ways to make this happen. But it all starts with one of 2 decisions, KDP or Ingham Spark. And just go through there so that you can have a sense of relief that your book will actually get published and published well. So Susie, you mentioned pre-orders a little bit, and you got ahead of me because I got super excited about this. KDP, you can't do pre-orders, okay? But with Ingham Spark, you can. Do you know how early you can put a book up for pre-order and buy your own author copies?
Oh, that's a good question. They always say to give it 30 days because then there's a time period where it actually locks you in that you can't make any changes anymore. I don't know exactly what that period is, but with 30 days, you're very in a good range. It might just be a week or 5 days prior that you can't make changes anymore. But because it always takes 3 to 5 days at least, like it takes KDP is a lot faster when it comes to publishing. Ingham Spark always takes longer. And so right now, like a book I just published last week, I helped publishing, it took at least 5 days until we heard back with the proof from them. So don't like think that you can just like go on there and tomorrow will be live or the same day. It doesn't always happen, especially with print books. That takes a little bit longer. So there's a little bit of a lead time, but I would say a week or two. You have a little bit of time, but really 30 days, I think, is a great way to build some traction and to get your book out there. And I just remembered one more thing I wanted to say earlier. I also had a client where they did go right away to Ingham Spark and Amazon, and they were able to manage that, but they didn't actually see a ton of sales coming through Ingham Spark. So they, on their second book, they're just going through KDP now because they managed to market their book so well that they don't rely on Ingham Spark and that reach, and they can just go straight onto KDP. So it happens both ways, like you said, pick a platform and go with that, learn the kind of ways, and then you can always expand. Like you can always, that's the beauty of self-publishing and print on demand, that you can move back and forth however you want. You can also unpublish your book again. So yeah.
Okay, this is amazing. This is a great point to kind of start coming back to kind of the whole publishing concept as a whole as we kind of wrap up here in the next couple of minutes. When I think of publishing a book, right, there's a certain amount of information that you need for you to be able to publish it on whatever platform that we're talking about, right? And so if you're listening to this, here's some of the information that you need. And Susie, I'm going to kind of riff off the top of the dome. And if anything comes to mind that you want to add, I'm going to give you a chance to additionally do it. So when you publish your book, you're going to need to know the information such as the title, the subtitle, the author name, aka you, superstar, I'm talking to you, right? You know that. You need to know, is it adult content? Is it, you need to know what categories you want, what keywords you want. You need the book description. You need to have the cover file photo. You need to have the ebook file for the ebook. You need to have the paperback file for the paperback. You need to have the right price points. You need to have the right distribution. Is there anything else? And I know I'm going through this and we talk a lot about this, but is there anything that I missed? I know I went really fast. Is there anything that we also need to make sure we have ready when it comes time to publish?
Yeah, I think you covered most of all. The one thing that is a little bit more tricky with Ingham Spark and takes a little bit more education is that they ask for a wholesale discount. And for a lot of people, they're like, what is that? Like with KDP, you'll just type in your price. I want my book to be $12.99 and I get $5 of royalties. So, like you kind of see everything. But with Ingham Spark, you also have to pick a wholesale discount. And that can be anywhere between 30 to 54% that you're giving away of your book to those retailers, because Ingham Spark offers that discount to the bookstores that they're going with. And so that's something I help authors to get educated on, what that actually means. Like, how does that influence the distribution itself, and how does it influence the royalties that they get at the end of the day, because it does take a lot of money away from it. And then the other thing, a huge difference between KDP and Ingham Spark, is the returns. So with KDP, because it's a Amazon platform, they go straight with their Amazon policy. They have free returns. You can always return those books. With Ingham Spark, you have to make a decision to return or not to return. And if you pick yes, deliver back, and someone buys that book, you will actually be paying for those returns. So imagine Walmart buys your book, they buy 500 books, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, we bought the wrong book, or whatever happens, they send it back. Now you have to pay for those 500 books, the list price. You don't just pay the author price, you pay the list price that's on Amazon. So for some authors, that might be like, that might be bankruptcy for them, you can't. So I often advise authors pick the no return option. It's not, even though Ingham Spark, their language on their website, when they explain things, they try to get you to offer the highest wholesale price. They try to make you offer returns, but that's in their benefit. That's not always in your benefit. So I always help authors through that, to not say that. And then one more thing, a good reason to use both platforms if you want the bigger reach, is that if you list with KDP, your book will never show out of stock unless you unpublish it. It will never show out of stock. With Ingham Spark, every once in a while, you'll see like the book says out of stock, even though it's a print on demand thing. But if you have both, then you will never see that. So I always, even when people go with Ingham Spark, I advise them still put it on KDP, because you get that cushion, so yeah. That's
Susie,
something I just thought about, is the returns, the wholesale. But I think you covered everything else. There are small little details like KDP Select, like what is that? Like that's a whole nother marketing thing that Amazon does for their customers. And There's just so much, but yeah, I could go on and on, but no, you did cover it, the categories, the keywords, title, you got it.
Yeah, no, this is great. Yeah, and there's of course there's so much more into it, but I really want to show people that you can do this.
Mhm.
Okay. You've gotten through the hard part. You wrote the damn book already. Now it's just the publishing side of things, right? And of course, you want to do it well, you want to make sure it's done correctly, and that's where we can support you, right? But that's why we have this information, because Susie's an expert on this. She knows the differences. And so as you're listening to this, start to get some information, start to see what platform might make more sense for your long-term goals, for what you want to do, and then commit to it and go for it. And like Susie said, you can always adjust, make a change, do an edit, something like that. And that's available to you as a self-published author. You have the control, you have the power. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So, Susie, before we wrap up here, is there any piece of advice that you would give to an aspiring author who is getting ready to publish their first book? Is there any advice that you'd leave them with?
Okay. I would say one thing I think that's really important for authors to know, because I get so excited for them, and it breaks my heart when the book comes out and then they see no sales, and I'm like, oh no, like, like I want to like prepare them for that to not happen. And to prevent that, you have to market your book. Like, it is so, so crucial. Like, I see so often that authors think because my book is on Amazon, now millions of people are going to see it. No, there's millions and millions of books on Amazon. So your book is not just going to jump up there all of a sudden. So you have to market it. And I think that's like one of the best advice I can give to authors, like besides working with professionals, of course, and like, making it look good. And even though your book is self-published, it doesn't have to look self-published. Like, we are people, just like people that work at big publishing companies that will, and I did work at a big publisher, that can help your book to not look self-published, but you also want to make sure it sells. So that you don't get your heart broken when it's out there and you don't see any sales. So make sure you market your book along the way. From the moment you conceived your book, you're writing your book, put in work to market your book and talk about your book as well.
Yep, I love that. I love that. So how do we follow you? How do we work with you? How do we learn more about you? Where can we find you online, Susie?
All right. Yes. So my company's name is Creative Blueprint Design, and you can find me under that link on Instagram, Creative Blueprint Design. And yeah, that's my website as well. So creativeblueprintdesign.com. And that's the best way to contact me.
Awesome. Awesome. We'll get all that linked up, but I just want to say thank you for coming on today, Susie. This has been a blast. You're so knowledgeable about the space. And we could definitely talk more about publishing and all these different things, get into like the nitty gritty. And we might have to do that of like a step-by-step publishing breakdown, comparing the platforms. But for those of you that enjoyed this episode, okay, if you enjoyed this, reach out to Susie. If you have questions, ask Susie. She's really, really helpful, and she does a really, really great job. So if you need anything, ask her. If you like this episode, take a picture, screenshot it, let us know you listened to it. We'd love that. And otherwise, we will see you on the next one.
Well, thank you so much for having me.